Today is June 7th, 2024. I'm Gabriele Fellows with the Museums of Lake County, and this is an oral history interview with Voris Brumfield Reed. Voris, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for asking me.
So to get started, what can you tell us about your name? Were you named after anyone?
Yes, I was named after my mother's youngest brother, or her only brother, and that was Voris James. He was 8 years younger than my mom.
And what is your date of birth and how old are you?
I'm 76 years old, and my date of birth is December 1st, 1947.
And where were you born and raised?
I was born in San Angelo, Texas, and spent a lot of my youth in Houston, Seguin. I lived also in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Waltham, Massachusetts before going off to college.
And why did you move to Lake County?
Well, it was my husband's idea. I met him down in Southern California, and back in 1970, yes, it was 1970 that we met, and there was an earthquake in the spring of 71, and we decided to leave Los Angeles for what I call the summer, and go up to Yuba County, or Sutter County, Yuba City. And his parents lived there, and we were just going to spend the summer. And then when we got there, we decided, we need to look for some place to live. We both decided we didn't want to go back to Southern California. So we started out looking in the Grass Valley, Nevada City area, over in the hill country. And he said, I remember as a teen, because he grew up in Yuba City, going over to Clear Lake to water ski. And he said, why don't we look over in Clear Lake and see if there's some place over there? And we did. We began looking in the Lakeport area, and I wasn't a big fan of Lakeport. And he picked up the penny slaver, and it said there was a 1 acre house, a house on an acre with 2 creeks, and it was a great price. And at the time I was teaching at Yuba College in Marysville, so we had to drive back, and it was a little over 100 miles. And he said, well, I'm going over tomorrow to look at it. Well, I had class, so I couldn't go. So he drove over, and the owner of the house put his dogs in the house so he could look around. So he only saw the outside of the house. And he came home, drove back to Yuba City and said, I love it, I love it. You need to go over tomorrow, put a down payment on it if you like it at all. And so I didn't have class the next day. So I drove over the next day back, and it was raining cats and dogs. And the guy had put his dogs in the garage. So I couldn't see anything on the outside of the house, but I was able to measure the inside, and it was a little bit bigger than the house we were living in Yuba City. And I said, okay, this is it. We're buying a house. And so we did. We bought our first house together.
What was your impression of Lake County when you got here?
Well, I didn't spend a lot of time around the county. It was mainly focusing on getting the house together, because we had our daughter, who was 1.5 years old, and Richard's sons. They were there for the summer. So I was intent upon getting a garden in. And I really liked where we lived, which is Anderson Springs, because there are hills all around, and there's flowing water and places to pick blackberries, and the kids, fish for crawdads, and I just thought it was wonderful.
And what was your favorite part about being a teacher at Yuba College?
Well, I have a degree in theater from the University of Denver, and so I did a lot of musicals and plays, and was in a dance troupe there. So at Yuba College, I taught dance, and I enjoyed empowering the students so they would come, some of them with more experience than others, but it was wonderful getting them to work together and create cohesive dances and watching them grow emotionally too.
Did you have a favorite student?
Well, I have two of my students that I'm still very close to. So, yeah, I had a few favorite students. One, because this is over 50 years ago now, who lives in San Diego. So she and I have remained friends. And another who lives in that same area that we have remained friends. So yes. And then one student who actually, she was quite a bit older than I. That was when I was pregnant with my first daughter, and she was the person that I called to take me to the doctor when I was in labor, because I didn't realize it. So
okay.
yes, I would say she was a favorite also.
What are the challenges about being a teacher?
I would say I didn't find it so much challenging. It was more exciting than anything, because it was theater dance, and it was the idea of, and I was only teaching part-time. I only taught 3 days a week and 3 classes each day. So it wasn't a full load by any means. And there was a challenge in balancing being a new mother, and I was nursing at the time. So I would come home from class and try and nurse my daughter really, really fast so I could get back to my next class. And she didn't like that very much at all. So I would call that a challenge.
What's your daughter's name?
Kristen is our oldest daughter. Mm-hmm.
And how old is she now, and what does she do for a living?
I think she's 52, 51, 52, something like that. And she lives in Southern California, and she works in hospitality. She is in the finance department of a hotel chain.
Do you have any other children?
Yes, we have 2 sons that I inherited when I married my husband, and they are 62 and 60, I believe. And then our youngest daughter is 46, 47, something like that, yeah. And she lives in Tennessee right now.
Do you have any grandkids?
It's between 17 and 20, if you include their spouses.
Wow.
So yeah, one child has 10 children of her own. So yeah, I have lots of grandchildren, yes.
What do you like about being a grandma?
Well, it was impressive to me that 3 of my grandchildren asked me to officiate their weddings, and that was fun. I like having grandchildren come and visit, especially during blackberry season, because we go and pick blackberries and they get to crawdad and things like that. So, and I've taught a couple of them how to drive cars. I taught my oldest son how to drive also. Was less successful with my youngest son. So helping them with growing up, so to speak, is really fun.
So in 1979, you ran for the school board in Middletown. Mm-hmm. Why did you want to get involved?
Well, it was, I was actually teaching dance with Yuba College at the time, and some of my students, and I think I might have been teaching preschool at the Methodist church then also. I did that for about 2 years. Well, it was 77 that Star was born, so it was 79, yeah. California passed Prop 13, which limited how much property taxes could be increased. And it actually cut them initially, and the school board was having a rough time or the school district. And some of my students were complaining about the fact that they weren't having books in school, and they were doing things on mimeograph paper, and they were complaining that the school wasn't doing as much as it needed to. And because my oldest daughter was getting ready to go into school, I said, and I had heard that there was a position open on the school board. I said, well, you know, I'm a teacher, I have children, a child who's going in the system, and I want to get involved. And so I did. I ran for the school board. An incumbent was also running, Alan Johnson, and he and I were the two top vote getters. So I went on the Middletown School Board.
And what kind of projects did you accomplish during your time?
Well, it was the start of geothermal moving over from Sonoma County to Lake County, and we had a horrendously large jump in school population. And at that time, and I think even now, they are they reimburse schools, the state reimbursed schools based on your average daily attendance, the ADA, from the previous year. So the school did not have enough money to deal with the large influx of students from the geothermal workers. So the geysers were booming in our area. We had a new school superintendent, Dr. Bill Cornelison, and so I was a new school board member, and the other school board members were Dennis Yukin, George Hoberg, Bill Hekmovich, who happened to be the dean of Yuba College here in Clear Lake at the time, and Alan Johnson, and all of those men had day jobs, and the superintendent needed someone to go with him to Sacramento to lobby or to plead our case that we cannot run a school district based on the attendance we had in the previous year, which was maybe 300 students, K-12, and now we had 600 students. We'd virtually doubled the attendance, but getting the funds from the previous year. And he introduced me to how legislation worked and the fact that he said, I can go as a superintendent, but legislators respect other elected officials. So he invited me to go with him. So I did, and I had several meetings with some of the geothermal operators as we pleaded our case. Harry Bain from Union Oil and Bill Woods of Ammon Oil. And it was an education for me to work with Dr. Cornelison and see how you lobby. One for legislation, I think Doug Bosco was our state senator at the time. And so there was a legislation passed. It was AB 1905. And in that, the royalties that were generated from the geothermal revenues, all of those funds went to the state. Well, with AB 1905, it was that a percentage of those royalties needed to come back to the local area where they were generated because of the impact that geothermal was having on the local districts, and we didn't have the, anyway. So with that, we were able to get portable classrooms and deal with this increase in population. And because the funds were coming in regularly, we were able to build a new gymnasium, a new science and library complex. We actually negotiated with the state of California to get a portion of land on Highway 175 on Cobb because we were busing so many youngsters from Cobb, from an elementary, to the elementary school, and it was felt that we needed a school on Cobb, so we built a school on Cobb Mountain after getting permission to get a portion of Boggs Forest for that. And I think we began plans on the Hidden Valley School because Hidden Valley was growing rapidly at that time also. So those were some of the major projects that we accomplished when I was on the school board.
What will you take from your time on the school board, take with you?
A greater respect for youngsters. And when I say that, it was a greater respect for myself also. When I was on the board, the four guys said, okay, it's rotating. It's now your time to be chairman of the school board. And said, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. Sure you can, Voris, sure you can. And I refused to do that. And now I realize that I should have taken advantage of that opportunity. I got to travel to a number of conferences and meet people in other areas, those who were on school boards, and how to negotiate, because we had several unions so those were things that I learned as well.
So you ran for the Board of Supes in 1984. Why did you want to be a supervisor?
Mm-hmm. It was an interesting time because geothermal was not only impacting us from a population of the school district enrollment standpoint, it was impacting the communities. And just before I decided to run for the Board of Supervisors, maybe 3 years before, while I was still on the school board, we had a geothermal spill into the waters above the community where I live in Anderson Springs. And at that time, I come from an urban area. You know, we don't know where the water comes from. You drink, you just turn on the tap, you flush the commode. You don't know where, sanitation goes. I was urban. I didn't realize we had a septic tank. I did not realize that Anderson Springs at that time got water directly out of the creek. The industry was impacting our community, and we decided that we needed to have a secure water system. So that was the beginning of my going beyond the school board and realizing that there are county officials that have an impact on what gets approved or doesn't get approved. And so I became aware of the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. And there was, the supervisor at that time was Howard Day, who was from Lower Lake. And we invited Mr. Day, because he was running for election. We invited him to come and talk to some of the community members in Anderson Springs, and he came and he seemed very pleasant, but he didn't seem engaging as far as the community was concerned. And I said, we need somebody who is going to really represent us. And because I'd been teaching for Yuba College over in Clear Lake and had been doing guest speaking at the Lower Lake Church, Methodist Church, I knew the community, and we had been in the Lower Lake Parade and everything. And I said, these are nice people. They need somebody who's going to fight for them and represent them. And that was when I decided, and we had gotten our community water system built. I wrote grants, and so that of the $1.2 million that was needed to build this water system, we wrote grants for a little over 800, well no, it was more than that, it was $950,000, so that we got them from the California Energy Commission, the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And I spoke before the Board of Supervisors about why we needed some of the AB 1905 funds for our water system. So that I was successful in that, and said, we need someone who represents District 1. And that was when I decided I was going to run for the Board of Supervisors. I was disappointed to find out that I could not be on the school board and the Board of Supervisors, because I really enjoyed serving on the school board. But so I had to resign after I got elected. So that was, I served 5 years on the school board.
And who was on the Board of Supes with you at that time?
At that time, Carl Larson was from District 2. Walt Wilcox served from District 3, and also elected at the same time I was elected was Bud Franklin from District 5, and Karen Mackey served from District 4.
And what's the most memorable county ordinance that you helped pass?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think it was possibly the first time we began setting up through the planning department community plans. And so developing those in the hearings. Another important thing, however, was the passage of the sewer system in Middletown. For years prior to that, Middletown had been offered funds from the state to sewer itself because we have very shallow groundwater, and it was limiting growth in the community, but also it wasn't healthy. Many people and most people had wells. So in finding out that there were funds available, I was very active in promoting our getting a sewer system for the community of Middletown. So I would say that was important. We underground utilities in Lower Lake and 2 areas of Middletown, put in sidewalks, put in a bike lane on Lake Street in Lower Lake, and yeah. So it was a time of growth. Oh, also built the Red Bud Library.
Oh.
So the other library was quite small, and set aside enough funds to build a new library for South County.
So talk about managing the museums and helping create the Schoolhouse Museum with Kelly Cox and Jane and John Weaver.
Well, I managed the county museums after I got off the Board of Supervisors. But in terms of setting up the Schoolhouse Museum, it was in the latter part of my first term that I became aware that the building was, even though it's a 2-story huge building in Lower Lake, it was not being managed well. You couldn't even get up to the 2nd floor. It was infested with bats and pigeons. We were renting it to a church group who had sectioned off portions of it, but it was in really horrible shape. The roof and the siding was coming off, and just really horrible shape. And from a liability standpoint, we, from our risk manager, he felt that it would not be safe to rent the building any longer, and the county should tear the building down. Well, I really felt it was important to let community members know what was being planned. And so I informed the community. There's a group that meets, it's called Lower Lake Action Committee. And I would go to their monthly meetings, and I informed them that the county was considering destroying or razing the schoolhouse because it was in such bad shape, and we frankly didn't have funds to salvage it. Well, Jane Weaver, who I had directed in some plays, including The Sound of Music down here in Lower Lake, and she got a group of people, you can't destroy that schoolhouse. We've got to save the schoolhouse. We'll raise money. We'll do whatever it takes to save the schoolhouse. So Kelly Cox who was the county administrator at the time, felt that it was important that if we could save it, that we should save it. However, it was going to cost much more than we had, that we could raise, and felt that it should be staged. First of all, secure it, evict the bats and the pigeons and all of the other animals that had lived here, and then clean up around the building, essentially gut it or salvage whatever could be salvaged in terms of the tin plate, and begin by cleaning and setting up a plan to save it and have it become a museum for South County. And Jane was determined. She was the most determined person you ever wanted to meet, and they held a series of fundraisers, as well as Kelly being able to find funds to stash away each year. And in that process, they were able to save the schoolhouse. There were still some people here who had actually gone to school here in the schoolhouse. Maxine Glimmy, and I knew there were the Kugelman sisters. There are 3 Kugelman sisters who had gone to school here, as well as John Jago, who lived in Jago Bay, who had gone to school here. And so they were very much so in favor of saving it, and we had some anonymous, very generous donations. And so the schoolhouse was saved. Kelly Cox volunteered on his days off to come and shovel back guano and everything, and I think his name is listed as one of the, something was named after him because of his actual work in the process.
What were John and Jane Weaver like?
John was very mild-mannered. I directed him also in The Sound of Music and in a few other plays like Lysistrata, but Jane was an incredibly direct, go-getting person who wouldn't take no for an answer. And they were members of the Methodist Church down here in the Lower Lake, so I knew them in that way also, but very determined, and they were good at getting other volunteers to help with the projects that they worked on.
And what was your favorite part about being a board of supervisor?
I would say my favorite part was getting out into the community and finding out what the community needed and wanted, and then trying to give the information back to the community in terms of what was happening in Lakeport, what kind of decisions that were being made, and what, letting people know that counties are actually the arm of the state. We actually implement state rules as well. So helping people recognize that we're all interconnected, whether it's the federal government, and many times we were able to get funding from the federal government for major projects that we needed also, that the federal government, state government, and county government worked together. And that was important, not only for me to understand, but to try and pass on that understanding to others.
What jobs did you have after being a supervisor?
I was on the Board of Supervisors for 8 years, and I truly enjoyed interacting with, I think at that time there were like 54 divisions that we dealt with, whether it's from weights and measures to Lake County Sanitation District to animal control, planning, roads, the courts, juvenile hall, whatever it was. But after I left the Board of Supervisors, I think it was marketing. I'm trying to remember, because I'm trying to remember the timing, but it was the marketing department, and I worked at Vista Point and worked at the visitor center up there for a while. That was fun because we got to share with people how wonderful Lake County is and tell them where they could go and what they could do, what wonderful things there were there. So I worked in that department. But I also worked in public services. So I worked as an analyst in the public services department, and my main job there was helping people understand about recycling and encourage people to do more recycling, because the state had passed a law that we had to limit the amount going into the landfill by certain dates. And so I helped in that process. Also, after I left the Board of Supervisors, I moved to Texas to take care of my mom. She had had a severe heart event, and she was given 3 to 6 months to live. And as I'm an only child, I went back to be with her. But the care was so good that she lived quite a bit longer than that. So instead of, in 1992, I left for Texas and returned in 95, and my mom lived until 2005. So that was pretty wonderful. Yeah, so I was in Texas for a while. I was the executive director for the Ensemble Theater in Houston. I did that for almost 3 years, and then came back and went to work for public services. Also the visitor center, and that was when I was given the responsibility of the museums, the Lower Lake Museum and the Courthouse Museum. So I worked as the, I won't say the manager, but I was the liaison between public services and the museums.
Are you currently married?
I am. I got married in 2023 in November to my longtime companion. We've been together for over 18 years, and so we decided to marry, yes.
How did you meet him?
I met him online. It was 3 years after my husband had passed, and we began to date, and we dated for, I would say, 4 years, and then we broke up for a period of time, and then got back together and said, you know, yeah, this is pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, you're my guy, and I'm his gal, and blah, blah, blah. So we ended up getting married last November.
So talk about being a pastor at the Middletown Community Church. How did you become the pastor? What was the process?
All right. Well, you have to go back a little bit further to when I became a member of the church, which was probably in 1977, 76, probably 76, when I was a preschool teacher there. And the little old ladies at the time, I thought they must have been about 80 or 90. They were probably in their 50s or 60s, because I was in my late 20s. They said, you young people are using our church and you don't even come to church. And at the time, my youngest daughter was like 3. My oldest daughter was 3, and I hadn't had Kristen yet. I hadn't had Star yet. So I felt it was important for her to go to Sunday school and to go to church and to have that exposure. And then became pregnant with Star. And so it was really exciting returning to church with my daughter, because the people were so welcoming and inviting, and they loved having little people there. And so I had other parents with children start coming to church. And the pastor at the time was wonderful. He found out my history and invited me to be a speaker there. And so I started speaking, and first of all doing readings, and then actually sharing my experiences, my relationship with God, as a message, offering a message. So that was fine. At that time, our pastor was shared between, because we were such a small church, we could not afford a full-time pastor, and neither could Lower Lake. So he had what we call a 2-point, he had 2 churches that he worked for, a 2-point charge. So, and then we went through a very distinctive growth period, and we were able to afford a half-time pastor, and we got pastors who were just our pastor. And then we went through a slump again, and that's what happens in many areas, that there'll be a boom and then there'll be a slump. And during one of our slumpy times, it was felt that we could not afford an ordained pastor, And the Methodist system had a new process by which lay people who had not gone to seminary, but had experience in the church, which I had had. I'd been a member for over 30 years, and had been a speaker, had been on different committees, had led committees, but truly felt led by God to be of service, that we would do a training, which I did. I took the training back in 2008 and 9. And after that, was assigned as the lay pastor for the Middletown Community United Methodist Church. I did that for 5 years and then was ready to retire, which I did. And it was the summer of 2014. I retired at the end of June, and then the middle of July got a call and asked, Voris, would you take the Kelseyville Methodist Church just for 3 to 6 months? I said, oh, okay, yeah, I'll help them out for 3 to 6 months. I was there for 3 years. And then I retired again for 2 years, and we no longer had a pastor at Middletown, and I felt the call to return, which I did. And so in 2020, I think it was, I returned, and I'm still pastoring there.
So how would you describe your personality?
I'm inquisitive. I like to be involved. I like activity. And I am appreciative, if that's a personality trait.
And what are some of your greatest accomplishments?
I would say my children are right up there. Not only the children that I created, but the children that I inherited. I appreciate them as human beings, and I feel they're good for the world. And I feel that my grandchildren are as well. And that is an accomplishment, I feel.
And what would you describe as the best day of your life?
Oh my goodness, I've had a lot of them. I would say the 2 days that I married my husband were wonderful days of my life.
And what is something you wish you could do but you haven't done yet?
Oh my goodness. I tend to be a doer, so there aren't many things that I want to do that I haven't done. And it depends on what life brings to me, and then I just do it.
And what's the best advice you could give future generations?
Be grateful. If you find people who need help and you have a talent or a skill, share it. And take care of the world. Take care of the earth. Take care of your community.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
I'm grateful, yes. I've lived my life being grateful, and there's a lot to be grateful for.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today and for sharing your stories.
Absolutely. And this is me when I was a little girl, and that's my mom and her 2 sisters and their children and her husband. There's my cousin Winnie and me when I was little. See, I was really little. I'm starting to look like that again. I was about 3, maybe 2, and so I'm getting that chubby face again. This is when I was a little kid, and my cat was named Snur. went to Horsetail Falls when I was 11 years old in Mexico, outside of Monterrey, Mexico. So my mom, my aunt, and my dad and I riding down to Horsetail Falls. Here's a picture of me with my husband, my first husband, when we were moving from Los Angeles to Yuba City. And I had an afro at the time, back in the 70s, and then he had long hair. Oh, this is my wedding picture for my first husband.
Oh, okay.
With my mom. And this was our minister, the Reverend Cyril Sebastian Isaacs. And here's my husband and me at our house in Anderson Springs. I still had my Texas hair going on, and I'm holding the cat, and he's with the dog, and this is Kristen. This is before Star was born. So this was fairly soon after we moved to Lake County, because the house hasn't changed much. This is a picture of my daughter Star after she was first born. She was born in Anderson Springs. We had her at home. And then as she grew up, this is the one with the 10 children. Oh, when my youngest daughter got baptized, this David Pittman was the one who invited me to become involved in the church. Okay, these are 4 generations, my mom, me, my oldest daughter, and then her daughter. This is when 1998, so it was 3 years before my husband died, and these are all cousins. We had a family reunion, and this is a picture of us at the church, at the family reunion in front of the house. This is when I was on the town at the University of Denver, the musical. This is for the Renaissance pageant that we had in church, when I would turn a scarf into a boa constrictor and as a magic act.
Oh, okay.
And we had a Lake County can drive at the fair, and I'm in one of the bins where the cans are put in there. This was my birthday party that my husband put together for me. He bought crab and flowers and a card. And there's Kelly Cox.
Oh.
And this is, I was visiting the Board of Supervisors since, this is Gary Lambert. He followed Carl Larson in District 2, and that's his wife. Both of them have since passed, unfortunately. This is the Cameron Reeves was county council.
Oh, right.
And so I was there with his wife. We were at an event. And
I remember when he retired.
Cameron was wonderful. Me and Moke Simon. He was my preschool student at the Methodist church.
Oh, wow.
He was 4 years old, and I was his teacher, and we were running against each other for the Board of Supervisors.
Wow.
Yeah.